The great station floated in the darkness of space like a city made of light. Station was the heart of the galactic Concord, where the 12 elder species met to decide the fate of countless worlds. For thousands of years, they had ruled known space. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched young species crawl out of their home planets and reach for the stars. Now they watched humanity. Captain stood at the viewing window of the Terran shuttle as it approached the station. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and calm eyes. His black hair was cut short in military style, and his dark blue uniform carried the silver eagle of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. He had spent 15 years serving Earth, first as a soldier, then as a negotiator. He had faced death many times, but today he faced something different. Today, humanity would take its first real step onto the galactic stage. The shuttle docked with a soft sound, took a deep breath, straightened his uniform, and walked through the airlock. The corridor beyond was massive, built for species much larger than humans. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the air smelled clean but strange. A group of alien delegates waited for him. They were tall beings with long limbs and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their eyes held no warmth. "Captain," one of them said, "welcome to station, the summit awaits." Bowed his head politely. "Thank you, I am honored to represent Earth." The aliens said nothing more. They simply turned and walked, expecting him to follow. Followed. He knew he was being tested. Every step, every word, every expression would be watched and judged. The summit hall was enormous. It was a circular chamber with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Hundreds of delegates filled the room, representing species from across the galaxy. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no bodies at all, just floating lights or clouds of mist. All of them turned to look as entered. He felt their eyes on him. Some were curious, most were dismissive. Humanity was new. Humanity was weak. Humanity had only left their planet 100 years ago. To these ancient species, humans were children playing at a game they did not understand. Walk to the small section reserved for the Terran delegation. It was in the lowest tier, far from the center, a clear message about humanity's place. He sat down and waited. The High Chancellor entered the hall. Lord was a being of the Helix Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the Concord. He stood 9 feet tall, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that burned like cold fire. His voice filled the chamber without effort. "The summit of the Galactic Concord is now in session," announced. "We gather to discuss matters of trade, territory, and alliance. As tradition demands, each delegation will be assigned a diplomatic counterpart for the duration of negotiations." Listened carefully. This was the part he had prepared for. The counterpart system was old. Each new species was paired with an established delegate who would guide them through the summit. It was supposed to be an honor. Suspected it would be something else. Read out the pairings one by one. Ancient species paired with other ancient species. Powerful empires matched with wealthy trading nations. Each pairing was careful, political, designed to strengthen existing bonds. Finally, turned his burning eyes toward the Terran section. "And for the delegation of Earth," he said, his voice carrying a note of amusement, "your counterpart will be Queen of the Empire." A ripple went through the chamber, then came the laughter. It started as quiet chuckles from the delegates nearest to. Then it spread, growing louder, until the entire hall seemed to shake with cruel amusement. Saw delegates pointing at him, their alien faces twisted with mockery. He did not understand, not yet. A door opened at the side of the chamber, and a figure entered. She was humanoid, with skin the color of pale lavender and hair like spun silver that fell past her shoulders. She might have been beautiful once, but now she looked broken. Her eyes were empty. Her shoulders were bent. She wore a simple gray robe, and around her wrists were thin silver chains that clinked softly as she walked. This was Queen. Watched her approach. He saw the way the other delegates looked at her with disgust and satisfaction. He saw how she kept her eyes on the floor as if she had forgotten how to look up. He saw the chains. A delegate leaned toward him from the next section. "You do not know who she is, do you, human?" The alien's voice was filled with pleasure. "She is the butcher of, a war criminal, a failed queen who killed thousands of her own people. The conquered keeps her alive as a reminder of what happens to those who defy galactic law." The laughter continued. "She is garbage," the delegate said. "And now she is your garbage. Enjoy your summit, human." Looked at, she had stopped a few meters away from him, her eyes still on the floor. She was waiting, waiting for him to reject her perhaps, waiting for him to join the laughter, waiting for another small death in a life that had become nothing but small deaths. The chamber grew quiet, eager to see what the human would do. Stood up. He walked toward, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. Every eye in the chamber followed him. He stopped in front of her and looked at her face. Up close, he could see the scars, not on her skin but deeper, in her eyes, in the way she held herself. He had seen that look before, in refugees, in prisoners of war, in people who had lost everything. Bowed, it was a deep bow, formal and respectful, the kind of bow he would give to any head of state. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice clear and steady, "it is an honor to meet you. I am Captain of Earth. I look forward to working with you during this summit." The laughter stopped. Looked up. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her with respect. For the first time in years, someone had called her by her title. Her eyes met, and he saw something flicker there. Confusion, suspicion, and beneath it something that might have been hope. The chamber was silent. Lord watched from his platform, his stone face unreadable. The joke had not landed the way he expected. Offered his hand, too, a human gesture she did not understand. But she reached out anyway, her chained wrist trembling slightly. "Come," said gently, "let us find our seats." He walked with her to the Terran section, matching his pace to hers, never letting go of her hand. He helped her sit, then took his own seat beside her. The other delegates stared. Some were confused, some were angry. A few, very few, looked at the human with something like interest. Did not care what they thought. He had seen injustice before. He had learned long ago that the measure of a person was not how they treated the powerful, but how they treated the powerless. The summit continued around him but was already thinking, already planning. Something was wrong here, he could feel it. And he intended to find out what it was. The first day of the summit ended with walking back to her quarters. The other delegates gave them a wide space in the corridors, their eyes following with curiosity and scorn. Said nothing the entire way. She walked with her head down, her silver chains making small sounds with each step. Her quarters were in the lower levels of the station, far from the comfortable rooms of the other delegates. The door was plain gray metal. There were no windows. This was not a guest room. This was a prison cell with better lighting. "May I come in?" asked. "I would like to speak with you." Looked at him for a long moment. Her lavender face showed nothing, but her eyes were searching his face for the trick, the trap, the hidden cruelty. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was soft, rough from years of disuse. "Because I want to understand," said simply. She turned and walked inside. After a moment he followed. The room was small and bare. A bed against one wall, a small table with a single chair, no decorations, no personal items, nothing that suggested a person lived here at all. Sat on the edge of the bed, took the chair, pulling it to face her. For a while neither of them spoke. "You should not have done that," finally said. "In the summit hall, bowing to me, treating me with honor." "Why not?" "Because I have no honor left." Her voice was flat dead. "I am what they say I am, a criminal, a failure, a warning to others." "Is that what you believe?" She looked at him sharply. "It does not matter what I believe, it is what everyone knows." leaned forward slightly. I have learned that what everyone knows is often what someone powerful wanted them to believe. I have also learned that the truth is usually more complicated than a simple story of good and evil. Was silent. I am new to this galaxy, continued. I do not know your history. I do not know what the conquered has told everyone about you. But I do know that the way they treat you is wrong. A person does not put chains on another person unless they are afraid of them. And I wonder what they are afraid you might say. For the first time, something moved behind's empty eyes, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. You are foolish, she whispered. If you ally yourself with me, they will destroy you. They will destroy your entire species. Perhaps, said, but I did not come to this summit to make friends with bullies. I came to represent Earth, and Earth does not abandon people who need help. Stared at him, her lips trembled slightly. Why, she asked again. Why do you care? You do not know me. You have nothing to gain from helping me. In fact, you have everything to lose. Thought about the question. He thought about his home, about the long, bloody history of humanity, about the wars, the cruelty, the endless cycles of hatred and revenge, but also about the moments of grace, the times when people had stood up for strangers, the times when kindness had changed everything. Because it is right, he said. That is the only reason I need. The wall behind's eyes cracked a little more. She looked away, her hands gripping the edge of the bed. You want to know what happened, she said. It was not a question. Yes, if you are willing to tell me. The silence stretched between them, waited. He had learned long ago that some things could not be rushed. Some wounds needed time before they could be touched. Finally spoke. The Empire was once great, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. We controlled 17 star systems. We had art, science, culture. We were proud. She paused, her eyes distant. But we also had something else, something the conquered wanted. We called it a crystal that grows only in the hearts of dying stars. It is the most powerful energy source in the galaxy. You can power fleets, cities, weapons. The conquered had been buying it from us for centuries, but they wanted more. They wanted all of it. Listened without interrupting. My father was king before me. He refused to give the conquered control of our minds. He believed our people should control our own resources. When he died, I became queen, and I continued his policy. I thought I was protecting my people. Her voice grew harder. I was wrong. I was protecting nothing, because I could not protect them from what came next. She took a shaking breath. The rebellion started suddenly. One day there was peace. The next, 3 of my generals declared that I was a tyrant who was starving the people to hoard wealth. It was a lie. We had no poverty. We had no hunger. But the lie spread faster than truth could follow. There were riots, bombings, assassinations. Tears began to roll down her lavender cheeks, but her voice remained steady. I tried to stop it peacefully. I offered to negotiate with the rebels. I offered to share power, but they did not want peace. They wanted me dead, and when I finally realized that, it was too late. She looked at directly. The conquered sent peacekeeping forces to end the conflict, but they did not come to bring peace. They came to finish what they had started. They arrested me. They executed my family, my husband, my children, my mother, everyone. The word hung in the air like a wound. They told the galaxy that I had ordered the deaths of thousands, that I had burned cities, that I was a monster. None of it was true, but no one asked for proof. No one questioned the story, because the conquered controls everything. The courts, the news, the history. She lifted her chained wrists. They keep me alive as a symbol, a reminder that no one can stand against them. Every year, they bring me to the summit so the other species can see what happens to those who resist. Her voice broke. I am not a war criminal, I am a victim. My people are slaves now, working the mines for conquered wages. My empire is gone, my family is dead, and I am kept here in chains, waiting to die so they can erase the last piece of the truth. Did not speak for a long time. He sat with her pain, letting it fill the small room. Then he reached out and took her hands in his. Her chains were cold against his skin. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "I know how much courage that took." Shook her head. "It changes nothing. No one will believe you if you try to tell this story. The conquered has spent 30 years building their version of history." "Maybe," said, "but 30 years is nothing to a human. We have spent thousands of years learning how to fight for truth against lies. It is not easy, it is not quick, but it is not impossible." He squeezed her hands gently. "I cannot promise you victory, but I can promise you this: you are not alone anymore. Whatever happens next, you will face it with an ally." Looked at him with wonder and fear. "You really mean it," she said. "I really do." She closed her eyes. For the first time in 30 years, she allowed herself to feel something other than despair. It was small, it was fragile, but it was hope. And in the darkness of that small room, in the depths of a station built by ancient powers, hope was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The days that followed were strange for 30 years she had been invisible, a ghost that delegates walked past without seeing, a shadow that existed only to remind others of failure. Now, everything was different. Captain treated her like a queen. At each summit session, he walked beside her. He pulled out her chair before she sat down. He asked for her opinion on matters of trade and territory, listening carefully to her answers. He never spoke over her. He never ignored her. He never looked at her with pity or disgust. He looked at her like she mattered. The other delegates did not know what to make of it. At first, they laughed behind their hands. The foolish human was wasting his time on broken goods. But as the days passed, the laughter faded into confusion, then into anger. Lord watched from his high seat, his stone face showing nothing. But those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders. The human was not following the script. One evening sent a message to quarters, a request for a private meeting, accepted. The High Chancellor's office was at the top of the station, with windows that looked out into the endless stars. Stood with his back to the door when entered, his massive form outlined against the galaxy. "Captain," said without turning, "I hope you are enjoying the summit." "It has been educational," replied. Turned slowly. His burning eyes studied the human with cold interest. "You are causing problems," he said. "Your behavior with the criminal is inappropriate. It embarrasses the conquered." I was not aware that showing basic respect was against conquered rules. "Do not play games with me, human," took a step forward. "You are new to this galaxy. You do not understand how things work. The woman is a symbol, a lesson. When you treat her with honor, you insult every species that suffered from her crimes." Met the Chancellor's gaze without fear. "What crimes exactly? I have read the official records. They are surprisingly short on details." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or warning. "The details are not your concern. The verdict was delivered by the Galactic Court 30 years ago. It is settled history." "History written by the victors," said quietly. "On Earth, we have a lot of experience with that kind of history. We have learned not to trust it." The room grew colder. "I will speak plainly," said. "Stop this foolishness. Distance yourself from the criminal. Focus on the real purpose of your mission, which is to secure a place for humanity in the conquered. If you continue on this path, you will find that place becoming very small, perhaps non-existent." Was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Thank you for your advice, Chancellor. I will consider it carefully." He turned and walked toward the door. Captain's voice stopped him. "Humanity is a young species. You have potential. Do not waste that potential on lost causes." Looked back over his shoulder. "On Earth, we have a saying. The measure of a civilization is how it treats its weakest members. I have learned a great deal about the conquered this week, Chancellor, and I am not impressed." He left before could respond. That night returned to his ship, which was docked at the far end of the station. The Terran vessel was small compared to the massive cruisers of the elder species, but it was home, and more importantly, it was secure. Lieutenant Park was waiting for him in the command center. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, one of the best intelligence officers in the Terran fleet. She had been his partner for 7 years, and she knew him better than almost anyone. "The Chancellor's office is monitored," she said as he entered. "I couldn't get clean audio, but I got enough. He's worried about you." "Good," said, sitting down heavily. "He should be." He told her about her story, about the mines and the manufactured rebellion and the executed family. Listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. "If even half of that is true," she said when he finished, "we are dealing with a conspiracy that goes to the heart of the conquered. I know, that's why I need you to dig. 30 years ago the Empire fell. There must be records, communications, evidence. The conquered thinks they buried the truth, but nothing stays buried forever." Nodded slowly. "This is dangerous, Captain. If we're caught accessing restricted conquered files, they could use it as justification to move against Earth. I know the risks. And you want to do it anyway." Looked at her steadily. "I stood in front of a broken woman today and promised her that she was not alone. I intend to keep that promise." Studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that meant she was already planning. "I'll start with the communication logs from the time of the rebellion," she said. "If the conquered manufactured the uprising, they would have needed to coordinate with their agents on the ground. Those messages had to go somewhere. How long will it take?" "Weeks, probably. Their encryption is old but strong. I'll need help from the ship's AI. Use Arya, give her full access to everything." "Understood." Paused. "Captain, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? Even if we find proof the conquered controls the courts, they control the media. How do we use evidence that no one will be allowed to see?" Had been thinking about the same question. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the station's lights. "There is an old law," he said slowly. "I found it while researching conquered procedures. It's called the right of witness. It allows any species to formally testify about injustice before the full Galactic Assembly. Once invoked, the testimony cannot be stopped or censored." "Why would they have a law like that?" "Because 1,000 years ago, the conquered was different. They actually believed in justice, or at least pretended to. The law was meant to protect weaker species from being silenced by stronger ones." His eyes widened, "And it's still on the books. Never been removed. Never been used in centuries, but still technically valid. If we can invoke it, if we can get to testify in front of the full assembly with evidence to support her story, the conquered cannot legally stop us. They'll try anyway. Probably, but by then the truth will be out. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything." Was quiet for a moment, then she stood and offered her hand. "I'm with you, Captain. Let's burn their lies down." Took her hand and shook it firmly. "Start digging, and be careful. If they realize what we're doing, they won't just come for us. They'll come for everyone we care about." "I know," she said. "That's why I won't get caught." She left to begin her work. Stayed at the window watching the stars. Somewhere in the station, Lord was planning his next move. Somewhere in the lower levels was sleeping in her cell, chains around her wrists, hopping for a future she did not dare to believe in. And somewhere in the vast archives of the conquered, the truth was waiting to be found. Had made a promise, he intended to keep it. No matter what it cost. 3 weeks passed. The summit continued with its endless debates about trade routes and territorial boundaries. Attended every session, always at his side. He spoke when required, negotiated when necessary, and gave nothing away. But beneath the surface, the real work was happening. Lieutenant barely slept. She spent her nights in the ship's secure computer room, surrounded by screens that glowed with stolen data. The ship's AI, Arya, worked alongside her, a calm voice in the darkness offering analysis and suggestions. The Concord's encryption was strong, but it was also old, and old systems had weaknesses that newer techniques could exploit. Slowly, byte by byte, broke through the walls. What she found made her sick. "Captain," she said one evening, her voice hollow, "you need to see this." Came to the computer room. The screens showed a collection of documents, messages, and recordings, all dated from 30 years ago. "These are communications between Lord and a group called the Liberation Front," explained. "The same group that supposedly rebelled against Queen." She pulled up a message. It was encrypted with Concord codes, but Arya had broken it open. The message read, "Transfer complete. 20 million credits to accounts. First wave of protests to begin within the week. Ensure maximum civilian casualties for media coverage." His jaw tightened. "They paid for the rebellion," he said. "They created it," pulled up more files. "Look at this. These are the names of the rebel leaders. Every single one of them had secret accounts in Concord banks. They were paid fortunes to destroy their own empire." Another file, a recording this time, his voice unmistakable. "The Queen must be removed. Her refusal to surrender the reserves threatens the stability of the entire Concord. Whatever methods are necessary will be authorized. Whatever costs are incurred will be paid. Ensure that the official story places all blame on the Queen. By the time we are finished, she must be the most hated being in the galaxy." Listen to the recording 3 times. Each time, he felt the same cold fury building in his chest. "There's more," said quietly. She pulled up a document marked with the seal of the Galactic Court. "This is the evidence that was used to convict, the testimony of witnesses who saw her order the burning of cities, the records of her communications with military commanders telling them to show no mercy." "Let me guess, all of it is fake." "All of it," his voice was bitter. "The witnesses were paid or threatened. The communications were created by Concord intelligence. The entire trial was a performance. They knew she was innocent. They knew, and they convicted her anyway." She turned to face him. "Captain, there's something else. The order to execute her family. It's here too, signed by himself. He didn't just frame her. He murdered her husband and children and then made her watch." The room was silent, except for the hum of the computers. Stood very still. His hands were clenched at his sides. For a moment, saw something in his eyes that frightened her, a rage so deep it seemed to burn. Then he took a breath and the rage went quiet, not gone but controlled. "Copy everything," he said. "Triple encryption. Store backups on 3 separate systems, and start preparing a presentation that we can broadcast to the entire assembly." "What about security? If the Concord finds out what we have, they'll try to destroy it." "Let them try. Arya, can you verify the authenticity of every document?" The AI's voice came from the ceiling. "Yes, Captain, I have already begun the analysis. Every file carries genuine Concord encryption signatures. The timestamps are consistent. The metadata is intact. These documents are real and I can prove it." "Good, that's our shield. Even if claims the evidence is fake, we can prove otherwise." Nodded slowly. "So what's the plan? We can't just release this to the media. The Concord controls all the news channels." "We don't go through the media," walked to the window, looking out at the station. "We go through the assembly. I'm going to invoke the right of witness." "They'll try to stop you." "They can't, not legally. The right of witness is absolute. Once I invoke it, the assembly must hear the testimony. That's the law." "Since when does the Concord care about the law?" "They care about appearing to care about the law. That's their weakness. They've spent thousands of years building an image of fairness and justice. If they openly violate their own ancient laws in front of the entire assembly, they lose that image. And without that image, their power starts to crack. Consider this, it's a gamble. Everything is a gamble, but this one has better odds than most. He turned to face her. I need you to do something else. Contact Admiral, tell her to move the fleet to the edge of this system. Quietly. No aggressive positioning, just close enough to respond if things go wrong. You think they might attack us? I think we'll do anything to protect his secrets. We need to be ready for anything. Hesitated. Captain, if we bring the fleet into this, we're escalating. This could turn into a war. I know, but I also know that bullies only respect strength. The conquered has been pushing humanity around because they think we're weak. It's time to show them that we're not. He put his hand on her shoulder. I'm not looking for a war, I'm looking for justice. But if they force our hand, we will not back down. That's what it means to be human. She looked at him for a long moment, then she nodded. I'll contact the Admiral. Good, and thank you for all of this. I know I've asked a lot. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. You're my captain. More than that, you're my friend. I believe in what you're doing. That's enough. She left to make the call. Stayed in the computer room looking at the evidence on the screens. 30 years of lies, all documented. 30 years of suffering, all explained. Tomorrow, he would tell. He would show her the proof that her story was true, that she was not a monster, that her family had been murdered by the same people who had stolen her empire. He did not know how she would react, joy perhaps, or grief, or rage. But she deserved to know, she deserved the truth. And soon so would everyone else. The trap was set, the evidence was ready, all that remained was to spring it. Looked at the stars outside the window. Hold on, he whispered, we're almost there. The darkness of space gave no answer, but somewhere in that darkness, a fleet was moving. And somewhere in the depths of the station, a broken queen was sleeping, dreaming of the family she had lost. Soon she would have her justice. Would make sure of it. The morning of the final summit session arrived like any other. Delegates filed into the great hall, taking their seats in the tiered rows. Lord stood at his platform, reviewing the day's agenda. It was supposed to be a ceremonial closing, nothing more. Speeches of cooperation, promises of peace, empty words that meant nothing. It would not go according to plan. Walked into the hall with beside him. She looked different today, still thin, still wearing her chains, but her head was up. Her eyes were clear. He had shown her the evidence the night before, sitting with her as she read through message after message, recording after recording. She had cried, not with sadness but with something closer to relief. For 30 years she had wondered if she was going insane, if maybe the conquered was right, if maybe she had done terrible things and simply couldn't remember. Now she knew. Her memories were true, her innocence was real. And today, the galaxy would learn the same. Helped her to their seats and squeezed her hand once. She looked at him, and for the first time since they met, she almost smiled. The session began with routine matters. Trade agreements were finalized. Border disputes were noted for future discussion. Lord presided over it all with his usual cold authority. Then, as the Chancellor prepared to deliver his closing remarks, stood up. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. I invoke the right of witness, he said. His voice was calm but carried to every corner of the hall. Silence fell like a hammer. His burning eyes narrowed. What did you say? The right of witness. Article 7 of the Founding Charter. I invoke it now on behalf of Queen of the Empire, who wishes to testify about injustice before this assembly. Murmurs rippled through the delegates. The right of witness. No one had invoked that law in 1,000 years. Many had forgotten it existed. But had not forgotten. His stone face hardened. "This is ridiculous," he said. "The criminal has no right to address this assembly. Her crimes are settled history." "The right of witness applies to all beings regardless of status," replied. "Article 7, Section 3. The law is clear. You cannot deny this request." His hands gripped the edge of his platform. "I am the High Chancellor of the Galactic Concord. I will not allow this chamber to be turned into a stage for lies and manipulation." "Then you admit you are willing to break Concord law to silence her?" His voice remained steady. "That is interesting. I wonder what else you are willing to break." The chamber buzzed with whispers. Delegates looked at each other with uncertainty. This was not how things were supposed to go. A delegate from the Helix Dominion stood up. "Chancellor, the human is correct. The right of witness is absolute. If we deny it, we undermine the very foundation of Concord law." Another delegate from a species called the nodded in agreement. "Let the criminal speak. What harm can it do? Her guilt is already established." Looked around the chamber. He was calculating, weighing his options. Blocking the testimony would make him look tyrannical. Allowing it would give a platform. In the end, he chose to appear confident. "Very well," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Let the criminal testify. Let her speak her lies before the assembly. It will change nothing." He gestured toward the central platform. "The floor is yours, Your Majesty." The way he said her title was meant as an insult, but did not flinch. She rose from her seat. Her chains clinked softly as she walked down the steps toward the platform. Every eye in the chamber followed her. Some looked at her with hatred, some with curiosity, a few, very few, with pity. She reached the platform and turned to face the assembly. For a moment she was silent, looking out at the sea of alien faces that had judged her, mocked her, tormented her for 3 decades. Then she began to speak. "My name is," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I was once the queen of the empire. I was a daughter, a wife, and a mother. I loved my people. I wanted to protect them." She paused. "For 30 years I have been called a monster, a war criminal, a butcher. I have been told that I ordered the deaths of thousands, that I burned cities, that I betrayed everything I swore to protect." Her voice grew stronger. "None of it is true." The chamber stirred, eyes burned brighter. "The rebellion that destroyed my empire was not started by my people," continued. "It was manufactured, paid for, organized by those who wanted our resources and could not have them while I remained on the throne." She looked directly at. "The Conquered created my fall, and I have proof." Rose from his seat. "This is madness. You have no proof. You have only the desperate lies of a convicted criminal." "Then let me show you." Stood and activated his communicator. On every screen in the chamber the evidence began to appear. Messages, recordings, documents, the full weight of 3 decades of lies exposed for all to see. The assembly watched in stunned silence as his own voice played through the speakers. "The Queen must be removed. Whatever methods are necessary will be authorized." They watched as financial records showed payments to rebel leaders, as witness testimonies were revealed to be scripted performances, as the execution orders for his family appeared, bearing signature. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted. Some demanded explanations. Others called for immediate investigation. The representatives, the puppet government installed after the coup, sat frozen with shock and dawning horror. Stone face cracked with fury. "This evidence is fabricated," he roared, "created by human technology to deceive this assembly." "The evidence is real," replied calmly. "Every document carries genuine Concord encryption signatures. Every timestamp has been. Every file can be authenticated by any independent analyst." He stepped forward, his voice rising. "For 30 years this assembly has believed a lie. You have watched an innocent woman suffer. You have allowed her empire to be stolen, her family to be murdered, her name to be destroyed. And you did nothing, because you trusted the conquered, because you believed what you were told. He pointed at, "That man is not a leader. He is a criminal, a murderer, a thief who hides behind the power of this assembly to steal from the weak and destroy anyone who stands against him." The chamber was chaos now. Delegates were on their feet, shouting at each other. Old alliances cracked under the weight of the truth. Stood on the platform, tears streaming down her face. But they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. 30 years of silence broken at last. Tried to restore order. Guards, arrest the humans. They have committed treason against the conquered. But the guards hesitated. The evidence was still playing on every screen. The truth was still echoing through the chamber. And in that moment of hesitation, everything changed. A new voice cut through the chaos. It came from the communication system, broadcasting from outside the station. "This is Admiral of the Terran Defense Fleet. Any attempt to arrest Captain or harm Queen will be considered an act of war against Earth. Our vessels are positioned at the edge of this system. We are watching. Choose wisely." The chamber fell silent. Looked at the screens showing the positions of Terran ships. His face was a mask of cold rage. The trap had sprung, and there was no escape. The hours that followed the testimony were chaos. The summit dissolved into shouting and accusations. Delegates demanded investigations. Old grievances, buried for centuries, erupted to the surface. The carefully maintained order of the Galactic Conquered cracked like ice under pressure. Lord tried to control the damage. He declared the evidence false. He called for calm. He threatened consequences for anyone who acted against conquered authority, but his words fell on deaf ears. The truth was out, and it could not be put back. 3 species formally from the conquered before the day was over. The and the all announced that they could no longer trust an organization built on lies. They demanded independent investigations. They demanded justice. But the most dramatic change came from the puppet government that had ruled the empire for 30 years collapsed in a single night. The delegates who had served the conquered found themselves facing their own people. Videos of testimony spread across space like wildfire. Citizens who had been taught to hate their former queen watched the evidence with new eyes. They had been lied to. Their beloved empire had been stolen. Their royal family had been murdered. The anger was beyond words. Riots erupted on a dozen worlds. The puppet leaders fled or were arrested by their own guards. Military commanders who had once served, forced into silence by years of propaganda, stepped forward and declared their loyalty to the true queen. Within days, a ship arrived at station. It carried not weapons but envoys, old generals with gray hair and tearful eyes. Young officers who had grown up hearing stories of the Butcher Queen and now knew those stories were lies. They came to beg forgiveness. Was there when they met. He stood quietly in the corner of the meeting room, watching as they knelt before their queen. Their voices broke as they spoke. "Your Majesty, we failed you," the lead general said. He was an old man with scars on his face and shame in his eyes. "We believed the lies. We served the ones who destroyed you. We do not deserve your forgiveness." Looked at them for a long moment. These were the people who had abandoned her, the people who had watched her family die and done nothing. For 30 years she had dreamed of this moment. She had imagined rage, revenge, justice. But now, standing before them, she felt none of those things. She felt only exhaustion, and beneath that, a strange kind of peace. "Stand up," she said quietly. "I do not want your guilt. I want your loyalty, not to me but to the truth. Can you give me that?" The general rose slowly, his eyes wet with tears. "We can, Your Majesty, we swear it." "Then that is enough." She turned to. "None of this would have happened without you. I do not know how to thank you." Shook his head. You don't need to thank me. I only did what was right. You did more than that. You risked everything. Your career, your people, your life. Why? Thought about the question. He thought about his home, about the long history of humanity, about all the times they had failed to help each other, and all the times they had tried anyway. Because hope is the most dangerous thing in the universe, he said, and someone has to keep it alive. Smiled. It was a real smile, the first one in 30 years. It transformed her face, making her look almost young again. Humans are strange, she said. I think I am beginning to understand why the conquered fears you. Meanwhile, Lord was fighting for his political life. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His own words, his own signatures, his own schemes laid bare for all to see. Other members of the Concord's ruling council began to distance themselves from him. Old allies suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. Friends became strangers overnight. But was not finished yet. He retreated to his private chambers and contacted his remaining loyal forces. There were still those who benefited from the old system, those who had grown rich on stolen, those who feared what the fall of the conquered would mean for their own power. The human must be eliminated, said, and the woman, they are the source of this infection. Remove them and the crisis can be contained. His advisors hesitated. The Terran fleet is still in the system. If we attack their captain, they will respond. Then we will destroy their fleet. One small human force against the combined power of the conquered. It would be over in hours. Chancellor, with respect, 3 species have already withdrawn. If we attack the humans, more will follow. We could be looking at a full collapse. Slammed his fist against the wall, leaving a crack in the stone. Then what do you suggest? That I surrender? That I admit to crimes and let myself be judged by the very assembly I have controlled for centuries? The room was silent. No, said, his voice cold. I will not fall. I have built this conquered with my own hands. I have shaped the galaxy for 1,000 years. One human will not destroy everything I have created. He turned to his military commander. Arrest captain, do it quietly. If the humans resist, tell them their captain attempted to assassinate me. We will create evidence to support the claim. By the time the truth comes out, it will be too late. The commander nodded slowly, and the queen. Kill her, make it look like an accident, a tragic suicide perhaps. The poor criminal, overwhelmed by guilt, taking her own life. The galaxy will believe it. They believed everything else. The orders were given. The soldiers moved out. But had made a mistake. He had underestimated how far the truth had already spread, and he had underestimated the humans. Lieutenant had been monitoring Concord communications since the testimony. When she intercepted the arrest order, she immediately alerted. They're coming for you, she said over the secure channel. 20 soldiers approaching your position, ETA 3 minutes. Was with and the envoys when he received the message. He did not panic. He had expected something like this. We need to move, he said calmly. The Chancellor has decided to solve his problems the old-fashioned way. The general stepped forward. Our ship has weapons. We can defend you. No, if we start shooting, wins. He gets his war and he gets to blame us for it. Then what do we do? Thought quickly. The docking bay where the ship waited was on the other side of the station. They would never make it in time. But there was another way. Arya, he said into his communicator, can you broadcast to the entire station? Yes, Captain, all channels. All of them, every screen, every speaker, every device. Ready on your command. Looked at. One more performance, Your Majesty. Are you ready? She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. I have been ready for 30 years. Smiled. Then let's show them what humans and can do together. The broadcast began. The broadcast reached every corner of station. Every screen lit up with the same image. Every speaker carried the same voice. stood before the camera, her silver chains visible, her lavender face calm. Behind her stood and the generals, and beside them, visible through the window, was the black of space dotted with the lights of the Terran fleet. "People of the Galactic Concord," said, "I am Queen of the Empire. You have heard my testimony, you have seen the evidence, you know the truth." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now I must tell you something else. Moments ago, Lord ordered my death and the arrest of Captain. He believes that by silencing us, he can make the truth disappear. He is wrong." She looked directly into the camera. "The truth does not die. It does not vanish because it is inconvenient. It waits, it survives, and eventually it finds its way to the light." In the corridors of the station, Concord soldiers stopped in their tracks. They had been sent to arrest a criminal and a troublemaker. Now they watched their screens and saw something different. They saw a queen speaking with dignity. They saw a human standing beside her with quiet strength. They saw the future. "I do not ask for revenge," continued. "I do not ask for war. I ask only for justice, for my family, for my people, for all the species who have suffered under the rule of those who believe they are above the law." She turned slightly and stepped forward. "I am Captain of Earth," he said. "My species is young. We have only been among the stars for a century. We do not have the power of the elder species. We do not have their wealth or their weapons." He looked into the camera with steady eyes. "But we have something they have forgotten. We have the belief that every person deserves to be heard, that justice is not a privilege of the powerful, that kindness is not weakness but the greatest strength of all." He gestured too. "They tried to shame me by assigning me a disgraced queen. They thought I would reject her, mock her, treat her as garbage the way they did, but I looked at her and saw a person who had suffered, a person who had been wronged, a person who deserved better." His voice rose. "That is what humanity offers the galaxy, not conquest, not domination, but partnership, respect. The simple promise that we will stand beside you in your darkest hour, even when it costs us everything." The broadcast cut to images of the evidence. The messages, the recordings, the signatures, all of it playing on a loop, impossible to deny. And then something unexpected happened. The conquered soldiers sent to arrest stopped moving. They looked at each other, their alien faces uncertain. They had served the conquered their entire lives. They had believed in its justice, its order, its righteousness. Now they saw the truth, and the truth changed everything. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Their commander spoke into his communicator. "High Chancellor, we cannot carry out this order. The evidence is clear. We will not arrest an innocent man to protect a guilty one." In his private chambers, heard the words and knew it was over. His soldiers had turned. His allies had fled. The assembly was in chaos, and the species he had controlled for centuries were slipping through his fingers like sand. He was alone. The door to his chamber opened. Members of the conquered council entered, their faces hard with determination. "Lord," one of them said, "by the authority of the Galactic Assembly, you are under arrest for crimes against the people, falsification of evidence, and the murder of the royal family. You will stand trial before an independent tribunal." Looked at them with burning eyes. For a moment it seemed he might fight, but he was old, he was tired, and perhaps somewhere deep inside he had always known this day would come. "History will remember me," he said as they put chains on his wrists. "I built this Concord. I shaped the galaxy." "History will remember the truth," the counselor replied. "That is all." They led him away. 6 months later, the galaxy was a different place. The old Concord still existed, but it was changed. New laws had been passed. Independent courts had been established. The crimes of the past were being addressed, slowly and painfully, but honestly. Queen returned to her for the first time in 30 years. Her people lined the streets to see her. They threw flowers, they wept, they called her name. She was no longer a criminal. She was a queen restored. The new parliament met in the great hall where her family had once ruled. They had rebuilt it stone by stone, making it a symbol of hope instead of a reminder of loss. And on the day of their first session, they did something unprecedented. They invited a human to stand beside their queen. Captain walked into the hall to thunderous applause. He wore his dress uniform, the silver eagle of earth bright against the dark blue fabric. He looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he walked straight and tall. Stood at the front of the hall, wearing the royal robes that had been to her for so long. A crown of silver and crystal sat on her head, but her eyes were not cold or distant. They were warm. "People of," she said, "I stand before you today because of one man, a stranger from a young world, a human who saw injustice and refused to look away." She turned to, "Captain, by the ancient laws of the Empire, I grant you the title of. It means he who restores honor. It is the highest honor we can give to one who is not of our blood." The hall erupted in cheers. Bowed his head. "Your Majesty, I do not deserve this. I only did what any decent person should do." Smiled, "And that is exactly why you deserve it, because you did not do it for reward. You did it because it was right." She placed a medal around his neck, a circle of silver with a purple crystal at its heart. "The galaxy will remember what you did here," she said. "They will remember that when everyone else turned away, humanity stood up. When everyone else laughed, humanity offered a hand. When everyone else saw garbage, humanity saw a queen." She raised her voice so the entire hall could hear. "Let this be a lesson to all who seek power through cruelty. Do not try to shame the humans. They will only lift the shamed higher than you ever stood." The applause was like thunder. Later stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. The city stretched out before him, lights glittering in the evening darkness. Ships moved through the sky, carrying people who had been freed from decades of lies. Lieutenant found him there. "Captain, the shuttle is ready. Admiral is waiting." Nodded but did not move. He was looking at the stars. "We changed something, not just for everyone. The galaxy will never be the same." "Is that a good thing?" "I hope so. Change is always uncertain, but I think it was necessary." Appeared in the doorway. She had changed out of her royal robes into simpler clothes. She looked tired but peaceful. "You are leaving," she said. "It was not a question." "I have to. There is still work to do. Earth has made new friends today and new enemies. The conquered will not forget what happened here." "No, they will not." She walked to stand beside him. "But they will also not forget what humanity showed them. You have planted a seed, Captain. It will grow." She took his hand. "If you ever need anything, Earth has an ally in the Empire, now and forever." Squeezed her hand. "And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." She smiled. "I do, and I know you will come." He released her hand and walked to the shuttle, was already inside, preparing for departure, paused at the door and looked back one last time. Stood on the balcony watching him go. The wind moved through her silver hair. Behind her, the lights of her restored empire glittered like stars. She raised her hand in farewell. Raised his in return. Then the door closed, and the shuttle rose into the sky. As they broke through the atmosphere and entered the darkness of space, looked at her captain. "What are you thinking?" Was silent for a moment. "I am thinking about something said, about hope being the most dangerous thing in the universe." And he smiled, a small smile that held warmth and determination. "I think she was right, and I think humanity has a lot more hope to share." The shuttle joined the Terran fleet. The ships turned as one and set course for home. Behind them, the Empire began its long road to healing. And across the galaxy, species whispered a new truth about humanity. They are small, they are young, but do not underestimate them. Because when they make a promise, they keep it. No matter what it costs.